First and foremost, thank you so much for coming to our campus. I'd like to be the first to welcome our distinguished panelists. We're all diehard Bruins. And several years ago, as someone who first stepped in this campus I was in my 20s as a trainee, I can tell you that this is not the UCLA I set foot in. It's only gotten better with each passing year. And the way the UCLA, what at that time was our sort of baby steps in IP and creating a knowledge-based, feeding into the knowledge-based economy was in its very primitive stages. And I think stepwise, we become a very important force. And most importantly, this is not just for the investment community and the networking opportunities at this meeting, but also for our future trainees. At the big picture, I'd like to tell you that most academic institutions will tell you that they have a three-part mission: patient care, teaching, and research. But we at UCLA think that there is a fourth and a fifth mission, which is biomedical innovation and social engagement, which you've heard a little bit this morning about. And what do I mean by that? Any physician that we interact with will take care of several thousand people in their entire career. We are also at a center of education. So the people we teach, the physicians, they go on to take care of other physicians. So we help thousands more. Research is what helps tens of thousands of people. But mark my words, the lesson we have learned is even the very best research from all the schools on this campus, the 409 acres on this campus has some of the brightest minds in the world. They publish great research, but those research findings, the only way it can help millions of people is by having people you're seeing on this panel and at this meeting. And we consider that to be perhaps the most important mission of our university. And last but not the least, it's these kinds of innovations that ultimately bring some kind of ability for the entire world to come out of the madness that we face, because science and technology ultimately helps all of mankind. So with that, my 5-part mission statement, I'm going to request each one of the panelists to first introduce themselves. And after that, we'll kick off this discussion in the next 25 minutes or so, stepwise, so that we really dive into what is driving this field, what is innovative, and the venture people can tell us why someone would write a check for great ideas. So let me start off with my left and go down, so that if you could introduce yourselves first, and please engage, and this is going to be a great discussion. Thank you so much. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Florent Cros, and today I'm with Bionaut Labs. We're a startup located in the Culver City. And my background is in what you call MEMS, micro-electromechanical systems. My first sort of professional foray in that field, or applied to medical field, was with CardioMEMS based in Atlanta. And at the time, we created those tiny wireless pressure sensors that now reside inside the heart of a few tens of thousands of heart failure patients. And now I'm sort of continuing my journey there with micro or miniaturized devices applied to medicine or medical field, and that's with Bionaut, where we are embarking on sort of a more complex travel throughout the brain to deliver drugs eventually. Right?
That's great. Phenomenal name, though, Bionaut. Please.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm Jean-Pierre Hubschman. I'm an eye surgeon. I was trained in Europe, practiced retinal surgery in France and Spain, was recruited 18 years ago to UCLA, was faculty at the Stein Eye, which is the eye institute, was a retinal surgeon there. And as you mentioned, when you are faculty at UCLA, you have to see patients, perform surgery, train colleagues and young surgeon. And the third part was the research. And when I came to UCLA, I was introduced to the CACIT, which is a center of innovation, where you have surgeons and engineers developing new technology. And then I discovered the Da Vinci platform at the time. It was 2006. I was amazed by the technology and thought, oh, there's probably something to do with this for ophthalmology. And we started a program at UCLA with bioengineers, engineers, surgeon, and we developed 2 generations of robotic platform dedicated for eye surgery. And we spun off the company. I spun off the company with my co-founder, Jacob Rosen, who is still faculty in the engineering department at UCLA, but full-time CTO of the company. We spun off the company thanks to TDG. We were able to license all the IP we filed through UCLA and incorporate the company. And we raised seed round. And now we are developing a platform dedicated, as I said, for eye surgery, but with cataract surgery as its first application. And we are automating the surgery to assist surgeon to improve the safety outcomes and throughput.
Thank you so much. And of course, this is the continuity of care, as we say. Please introduce yourself.
No, it's my absolute pleasure to be here. I'm Vivian, Golfin director. I'm an investor with Intuitive Ventures. Intuitive Ventures is Intuitive Surgical's venture capital arm. We invest in startups that focus on pushing forward the future of minimal invasive care. That's quite broad, or at least our investment mandate is quite broad. So it's anywhere from new medical device platforms to therapeutic platforms to our digital enablers. And it's really focused on how can we improve patient outcomes ultimately.
Thank you so much. So to kick off this discussion, I'm going to give sort of 3 major areas we look at. It's people, ideas, and how to get it to the patient, sort of the general overview. What are we talking about in this particular session? So this was way back when the TDG group, when we were brainstorming about the session. It's very obvious that if you look at the past 100 years of the sort of the sweep of medicine, we had anatomy books. We looked at various parts of the human body. And what was maximally invasive has become minimally invasive. Minimally invasive has become micro-invasive. Micro-invasive has actually very nicely overlapped with interventional, the words we would use, interventional. And interventional itself is now becoming very laser-focused interventions. And then, of course, what is interventional is becoming external and interventional without sometimes even touching the human body. So external focus, ultrasound for fibroids, and of course, the ophthalmology field has phenomenal such examples. So if you were to look at that driver, with each passing decade, this push is becoming more and more, mainly because of outcomes and so forth. So keeping that sort of big picture, health systems are tuned to that for sure. And the power of imaging has added to this. So we are now able to handle data better. So with that thoughts in mind, why don't I get quick comments from each one of you about how you view as people. Give your comments. We can have a discussion. Then we'll talk about how you've evaluated ideas and what is driving, what is innovative in this field. And last but not the least, why would someone write a check and risk their money, their time, more than their money sometimes, to bring this to the market? So I can kick it off and seeing how you view the people in this area when you focus your time, and why, and each of you have very beautifully articulated why you invested your own time as examples to be in this field.
Okay, so I'll go first. I think I'm the engineer here, right? And you are the doctor. So I work with you, really, right? And as an engineer, really my job is to make tools for you, right? Now, hopefully you're going to finance me doing the thing. But this is really my job, right? So my view of the world is the viewpoint of an engineer. When someone comes to me and says, hey, we are going to fund an effort, we're going to try to lift this off the ground, we are going to have small, untethered devices, size of a grain of rice, move around the brain, controlled by an external contraption, no wires. Okay, it's a big one. For the engineer, it's it's great. What we have to do is make sure that it's safe, absolutely safe, no question there. And then you start to understand that there's beyond just this really big idea, and that's the idea of the founder of Bionaut, Michael Spiegelmacher. There's definitely a need. I mean, he didn't come up with that idea from out there. You guys, the neurosurgeons or the interventionalists that start to encroach on the neurosurgery field, there's a little bit of fight there. They tell us, hey, at this moment, if we want to access any part of the brain, we classically go in a rectilinear fashion. We are going to have all kinds of burr holes or craniotomy, and it's okay. We've been at it for 150 years. We know what we're doing, but there's a lot of things that those tools just cannot allow us to do. There's a lot of roads, a lot of passageways, a lot of ways to access those targeted areas that the current tools, and there's wonderful tools out there. There's those steerable needles and catheters. There's a lot of people doing phenomenal work in trying to go around to be as elegant and delicate as possible. But still, there's more that is needed. And then you have to do this sort of leap of faith. Are we going to really untether something and let it be driven by an external driver, an external electromagnetic unit in our case? Okay, let's do it. There's really a lot of advantages going there. As an engineer, it's my job to look at all the aspects, all the angles, and make it as absolutely safe and absolutely useful as possible for you, for the doctor, because the tool is only used when it's the right tool, right, for the right mission. Okay, so that's my little answer. I'm going to, pass it to you then.
So regarding the people, as a surgeon, I was a little bit frustrated about the inconsistency of outcomes depending on surgeon skills and expertise. And I was a retina surgeon, as I said before, meaning cataract surgery can go most of the time very well, but sometimes surgeons are not expert or not skilled, and you get a lot of complication coming from those surgeons. And I was a little bit frustrated. And so when we talk about people, I needed a team to build what I was envisioning. So all the different departments at UCLA, engineering, bioengineering, mathematician, and so on, we built that team together to design a platform which would address the unmet need, which would resolve all those problems surgeons are facing. And as a surgeon, there are three major tasks, which is vision, processing, and execution. And in all those kind of part, I would say, they are solution. I mean, vision can be really improved by providing multimodal imaging technology. Processing can be improved as well by AI and new solutions which are much more powerful than the human brain. And by the way, AI means you can continuously improve, while the surgeon will learn from during the residency and fellowship and then reach a plateau. With AI, you can keep optimizing all the trajectories, all the settings during the surgery. And the third part is execution. And we've seen that robotic can be much more precise than human surgeons. So it's really about the team defining the good product which address the unmet need and bring value to surgeon and patient and surgery centers, and bring together that product to market.
So maybe let's get the input from the venture group to see, when you actually have ideas, how do people in your area look at it? In the sense, of course, it has to fill an unmet need, but how do you evaluate risk? Because you're in the business of risk. And early ideas, this is where there are two valleys of death. One is the investment you have to make the research into something that's product. And then, of course, you have the other big valley of death, which is regulatory clearance, and marketing. So how do you evaluate early stage ideas, what you just heard?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So when we look at our investments, for us, number one is, does this actually impact patient outcomes? If it doesn't, then that's already a clear pass for us. But then afterwards, we look at the investment opportunity and at the deal, really at the risk profile point of view. And what we try to do is, well, with every type of company, there are risks. But with the risks that are for a specific company, how comfortable are we taking this risk, and how are we able to put mitigating strategies behind them to potentially alter that course? So that's kind of from a high level point of view how we look at risk. And ultimately, you have to also have an opportunistic view on things, because if you only think in risks, you might miss the opportunity around things. And so I always say, what's critical to venture is you need to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And so there is, even though we try to mitigate risk as much as possible, we also kind of have to take that risk and jump into the opportunity as well and really lean into it.
It's very nicely put. By the way, it'll also be great if the audience can step up. It'll be nice to keep this interactive, because it's not just the four of us discussing. So very much the trainees, the next gen, the entrepreneurs among you. So let me ask you a question, and maybe each of you can sort of comment on this. Just seeing what has happened over the past 2 decades. Let me start off with you, because you're doing something very innovative. Like in the past, implanted devices or medtech was either in and out, or if you're in, you stayed in there forever, like a pacemaker, which for 50, 60 years has been in the cardiovascular field. But now you actually have implanted technologies, which after you implant it, you can move it around, get it to a new location. It almost has become like that old, some of you are old enough in this audience to know the movie Inner Space by Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan. So what you're doing is a version of Inner Space, that you go in the body and you can move it around in very pre-specified ways. There are implanted devices that you can do for cardiac valves, for instance. After you implant, you can optimize it. So taking those things as an example, where do you see the field going? Maybe each one of you could make a brief comment about that. Your company itself, Bionaut, for instance, is so innovative because it's an implanted technology that can be later adjusted, moved around. So in those kinds of ways, what are the big innovations that each one of you are seeing?
All right, I'm going to try to make two quick points.
Can you keep it closer to you?
Yes. Okay, two quick points. Even within the evolution of our company, we can see a little bit of evolution of where the world went, or where it was about 10 years ago. When we started, there was a big push for, it was the tail end of the nanotechnologies. There was a key word. There was a concept of swarms of particles, like a flock, like a school of fish that you would drive to the right spot, all in unison. And you could do that in a number of ways from remote. Let's take magnetics again on the table. This is what we're using. And there's nothing wrong about that, except if you fast forward to today, you'll notice that our company in particular, and I don't think we will not end up being just the first one or the only one. We're dealing with just one device at a time. Okay. So from this concept of swarms, you already see that we realized that, well, it is safer. It is hard enough to get in there, hard enough to move around, hard enough to actually say for the first time to a surgeon, hey, your scalpel, you're not going to hold your blade, your implement, your tool, you will actually not hold it in your hand. There's not even a handle, there's not even a tube, a catheter, nothing. It's in a sense completely out of your control, right? So let's just start with one device, right? And what can we do with that? So for us, we are, this is our adventure, this is our journey, and this is a journey of one individual, which indeed is the small submarine with, the Dennis Quaid. So that's for the first part of my answer. The second part of my answer, I will bounce on a word that you use, which is implant, or sometimes you could call it a permanent implant. And there is a number of situations or number of situations where you may want to leave something behind. And that's, for example, the case of, I'll refer to my past with CardioMEMS, where there's a small wireless sensor that is placed inside the pulmonary artery, and it stays there forever, and it's interrogatable forever, and it gives you essentially the sort of the equivalent of what you would the blood pressure inside the left ventricle. Okay, these are true implants. They're forever implants. There's a range of there's a whole. This is almost the worst case scenario. That's, you have to really be jumping an extra bunch of hoops to get to full permanent implant. And then you have like the less than 24-hour, let's say, device that helps you do some a very specific microsurgical approach. In that case, then you still use this little device. It's still untethered. It moves around. It does a particular job and it comes out, right? But it doesn't leave anything. And then you have in between the device that goes in and maybe drops a payload, right? Some drugs, either in liquid form or even encapsulated or formulated, if that's the right term. There's a whole gradation in just the word implant. For us, I'll plug myself in a little bit. For us, we went from a swarm to a single one, and our first step, just like you also have a stepped approach to through FDA and all the regulatory things. Our first indication is for less than 24-hour microsurgical. And we are going to therefore show to the world, yes, it's okay, it's possible, it's safe to untether and do a small trip, do a small cut, work inside the skull, near the brain, and then come back out. And then the next step, well, we'll go a little further, and then we'll drop something, we'll drop a drug, and so on and so forth.
It's very beautifully articulated. Do you have comments on that in terms of what you see coming? And I mean, that almost sounds like science fiction, but it's become a reality.
So I mean, I can talk about ophthalmology. I mean, the field I know, what's coming, there are different companies developing a robotic platform dedicated for eye surgery, several for retina, because retina requires a lot of precision. And we actually started 15 years ago working on the retina application. But we pivoted because we think that we can bring to market not just a robotic system which can increase the precision, but a robotic system which can really assist the surgeon by providing better visualization, better processing, and better manipulation. What I mean by that is it's like pretty much like the Tesla of microsurgery. We integrate completely a platform which has visualization capabilities using different image modalities. The image are processed in real time, so the information is segmented using AI in real time. Like the surgeon can detect what anatomical structure are inside the eye. The system can do the exact same thing, and so more precisely, and can compute multiple image at the same time, where the surgeon can only see one image modality and process only one image modality at the same time. And then the execution is done by the robotic system, which means that the system can, with the autopilot, can pretty much do the surgical steps on its own, supervised by the surgeon. So the surgeon is looking at the graphical interface, validating the surgical plan, and validating during the execution of these surgical steps. So what I see is really beyond what robotic was bringing, which is increased precision. It's bringing surgeon assistance to improve the visualization, improve the processing, and improve the execution, and will help the surgeon improve the throughput, so do more surgery per day, but also increase the outcomes, achieve super outcomes at every single surgery. So improve the consistency.
That's so beautifully stated. Before we go to our venture person to make a comment on this, and this may interest some of you in the audience, in the past 40 to 50 years, when we started off, we did not even know what could be placed in the human body and not get rejected. If not for the Second World War, where pilots, when planes crashed, pieces of the windshield, which was, ended up in their eyes, that's when the ophthalmologist noticed that, oh my God, that was not causing a foreign body reaction. And of course, we now have intraocular lenses. So it's many of these things, happen by accident, careful observation. And of course, it comes from proper observations in sort of people who did something more. It may not have been a university per se, but the universities and academic places allows you to stop and ask the one further question you simply would not have otherwise. So the straightforward observations have now empowered a big field. So let me ask, how a venture expert would look at this. How do you evaluate an idea that sounds crazy to you? Like what was just talked about of Bionaut. Had it been sent 20 years ago, people saying, oh, you're in the wrong part of Los Angeles. You should be closer to Culver City in the movie studios. How do you sort of evaluate, and what are you seeing as you move forward, because you're a venture arm of a very innovative company?
Yeah, no, I think we're, what's really exciting to see is that we see more and more targeted clinical specialty platforms such as Horizon or Bionaut. I think from, when we're looking at an idea, or I would say more beyond an idea of looking at a company or a platform or a product, it goes really back to how can we increase or improve or impact patient outcomes. And one of the angles that we take, or how we look at that, is how can we potentially improve access? And so there are several very underserved patient populations, let's say, for example, the heart failure population, or patients suffering from urinary incontinence, stroke patients, where there's been very few progress over the years, but where there's a huge need and also a potential to make a really big impact. So as we evaluate these very forward-thinking concepts, we really think about, well, how can this improve or reach a larger patient population and target, and really turn around their journey. So that's one. That's, I think, for us always a big starter. And then afterwards, how can a company move as efficient and effective towards getting that product to market and really getting it to patients? And so you look at teams, you look at, how are they supported by other investors? You really try to take a wholesome look at the company and where are they at in which ecosystem when you make an investment.
Very nicely stated. So I'd like to actually, call upon the audience to start thinking, because we are now coming to the last phase of this panel. So it'd be great to get input and comments from the group over here.
You made a comment about foreign body reactions not discovered in World War II, and it made me think of when I was in my first year of residency. I was at Tufts, and we had a single surgical robot at the university, and there was an M&M related to the surgical robot, and I've never heard so many ad hominem attacks in a public forum before. So Vivian, to you, looking backwards, and JP and Shiv, to both of you, looking with your experience in the clinical arena, how do you see the path to clinical acceptance of these technologies when they're so far out of the paradigm of care?
Yeah, no, it really goes back to the ability to show that you're able to impact patient outcomes. I mean, if you're not impacting patients, no one is willing to take that upfront cost or risk around adopting new technologies. And so, early on, we recommend our companies, as Intuitive, had to go through that story themselves as well, of really building that evidence plan where you can clearly demonstrate value.
Yes, I think that you really need to bring major value to surgeon and patient. I mean, I realize as a surgeon that unless you have a major value proposition, we do not adopt like new product easily. I mean, we don't change our habit really easily. So it's either you get something which bring major value, and this is the reason why we developed this fully integrated platform, because we thought that just increasing the precision or just providing better visualization would not bring enough value. We built that platform, and this is by bringing value to patient, surgeon, and surgery center or hospital that you can really get the adoption you expect.
Beautifully answered. So, Matthew, I'll give you a quick response to what you just said. I think right in 2024, we are seeing the exact mirror image of what you related to in Tufts. And that is, right now, if you go to a hospital, and if you didn't have a huge robotic program, patients would walk away from that place. So you can see how much that has changed. To the extent now, in our interventional programs at UCLA Health, we do the entire human body, all interventions, interventional GI, interventional onc, interventional neuroradiology comes under one umbrella. And one of the trainings that we do nowadays is, you're in the middle of a case. What happens if all of this were to fail? So think of it like a pilot who comes into land, you have instrument approach, and all your instruments fail. How would you go back to the sort of first principles? So it's actually changed. All this power of technology is now making us better physicians. So many of you in the audience should look this up. The crash of Air France 447 is something that we make all our trainees learn, because that is a classic example where technology completely, misguided people, and people didn't go back to first principles. So I think we are now entering an arena, and it's such a joyful time to see AI. The previous panel, much more to come. You'll see that AI is almost, it's not like internet, it's going to be like industrial revolution. So AI-assisted procedures and AI-assisted physicians are going to completely replace people without. Therefore, there's no question of not having AI. It is how we do it, how we use that for science. And I think it's very exciting as a professor for me, and also seeing former trainees and our own companies go into the real world, that it's changing us and how we teach physicians. So thank you for that question. And let's get some questions from the audience. I'm glad to see a line. Quick questions, quick answers, please.
This question is for Vivian. Have you had any, there's been, over the years, there have been issues with targeted therapies for cancer within the body, where you destroy the healthy tissue around the tumor. But then there's been like the nano payloads where you can do a precision strike so that you don't destroy the healthy tissue. Have you seen any new projects to that end? And then also, where are we with imaging in terms of locating the cancer deep in the tissue, because imaging, is not 100%.
Yeah, no, we see a lot of technologies and exciting startups in that area, and so it's an investment focus for us, which we refer to as focused therapeutics. We've made an investment in this space called in a company called Surge, and it's a biotech company, and it's a polymer that can be left behind after the surgical resection has been performed, in order to decrease the chances on metastatic involvement. And so it's an area that, going back to the point, an area where we actively look at. Another, regarding from an imaging point of view, we're super excited about that area as well. There's so much that the eye can see, and so much more that we need in order to navigate when we're doing our surgical resections or ablation types of technologies, in order to really make sure not just only to target the cancer cells, but also how can you preserve nerves or delicate tissues around it. From an imaging point of view, within Intuitive, we have a large fluorescence group that's currently focused on it. We see new types of technologies come by. I would say the areas that we're most excited about are the ones that do not require dyes, etc., because a lot of them still require ING, etc., in order to visualize structures. And so I think there's a lot of excitement and movement around there. And I think the right technology is probably still to come.
Well, I mean, you can't really repair the tissue until you get rid of the cancer. I mean, you have to, if it metastasizes, you have to get rid of the cancer first before you can do any kind of repair. I mean, let's say it metastasizes from the original location to the brain, and you lose your basic functioning. You can't really, there has to be a way to get rid of the cancer first.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So there are different types of technologies. There are anywhere from drug releasing scaffolds that can be placed to ablation technologies that I think are in the pipeline and are probably going to hit the market in not too long from now.
Next question, and perhaps even in combination with immunotherapies, right? That's their hope too. Please.
So Matthew scooped my question, so I'm gonna build on. No, it's an important point. And so Vivian, you made the comment about how patient impact is really that's your gate, right? And if you can't do that, and ultimately, really for entrepreneurs, it's not just patient impact, but it's healthcare economics. And yet, in conversations like this about new tech and really ambitious ventures, sort of that end goal of impact, both sort of clinical and economic, is seldom discussed. And honestly, a lot of clinicians and technologists tend to be pretty resistant to even thinking about, and they make up lots of excuses. And you're smiling and nodding, so I'm not. And so if you could maybe talk about that a little bit, when an investor or some sort of stakeholder starts asking a technical entrepreneur or a clinical entrepreneur about those things, how can they sort of approach it in a way that is kind of seems ethically okay and also answers the questions that these business stakeholders are really looking for input on? Because if they don't, oftentimes that's the last chance they get to talk about it. So that was a long question, but I think you know where I'm going, right?
Yeah, no, and I assume you're going down also the reimbursement pathway and market access.
Yeah. And again, sort of not going out to 3 decimal places on your estimates, right? But sort of saying hypothetically, here's what could happen. And so I'm looking for you as an investor to tell folks in the audience, you actually do need to do this, but here's how you can do it in an appropriate way.
Yeah, and I'm just going to unpack it a little bit further. And so that's regarding a pricing strategy, or is it from how much capital you need?
It's sort of general, right? I mean, because I'm with the SoCal Venture Pipeline, and we see pitch decks every month, kind of like you, and amazing technology and exciting molecules. But it's sort of like, well, what needles is it going to move, and how, right? And sort of just to approximate it, and to. For so many entrepreneurs, they either don't want to think about it or they don't know how to think about it. And yet it's fundamentally why they're going to get attention and support. And so trying to raise that sort of question, again, sort of build on Matthew's initial point and your point.
Yeah. And so obviously it starts around impacting patients and creating evidence around it. I think another thing what's extremely important with these new types of technologies in terms of adoption is the reimbursement pathway and thinking about it. And so that's something where we try to not just do diligence on when we look at the companies, but also if we see that as a risk, do we have internal resources available for these companies to support them as they're building out their reimbursement strategy? Can we get investors around the table that we know well that are involved with the different payers? And so one of the critical things around new technologies is that often on, like early on, they're not established codes. It's expensive, which impacts also adoption, but really trying to be an active partner from that point of view and to support the company in making it a risk that cannot be overcome or might be a very long timeline and a lot of money from a venture capital point of view to how can we make this a manageable risk?
We should discuss more during the networking session. So stated differently, money that can wait. How long can you keep the flight in the air? And most venture firms are, some people would tell you, you people are in a relay race. You're handing it to the next person. So we should discuss more in the networking session, but please.
Hi, thank you. My name's Alana Arnold. I'm a practicing pediatric emergency medicine doctor, as well as here in the capacity of my startup. So this is for all of you. I wanted to get your sense in terms of your expertise in fields. How are you kind of leveraging this innovation and cutting edge technology for, I guess, like a population's approach, like for the masses? Like, we have the benefit of being in these very academic centers and access to certain resources that for the vast majority of the country, that's just not the case. So I'm interested in, given your expertise and experience so far, how are you translating that to kind of on the population level for the work that's being done?
I'll kick it off with very quick responses and love to get quick responses from my panel. You hit the nail on the head. It's probably the single most important question. Drugs are long-term, very expensive. Devices are a little more expense upfront, but they're in and out. And generally, you can reduce costs a lot more with them. And that would be the answer for this. And if you look back on medical experience, that's generally been the case. Start even with the simple syringe or a needle. That's kind of, you start off with the simplest med tech. And it's definitely has been scalable. And that is the big hope, that these things ultimately will be seen by what it does to not just the population, for the entire world. The world is one. We are physicians. We don't see any political or any divisions between even nations. We serve all of mankind. So that's a good question. And that's the biggest hope for medtech.
So in this path to impact a lot of people, Bionaut at least is very early on. Meanwhile, you have Intuitive Surgical. These guys, they're out there. They're phenomenal. Yeah, it was in 2006 or 7. I got to see a prostatectomy, I think, from remote on a big screen for 2 hours. It's just fantastic. Okay, so you have like almost the spectrum here. I'm very early. We are very early in that mission here. And the way you create a company like Bionaut is you have a very high level concept. Our goal eventually is to bring drugs exactly where it needs to be inside the brain and impact the area. Let's say, choose whatever area, putamen, and you are going to infuse this whole area with your viral vectors. Great. That's up there. The way you get there for us is you take a very focused and very small baby step. And the first baby step is not going to impact many people, many kids. And actually, we are first going to help a few kids for hydrocephalus, for a particular subset of hydrocephalus called Dandy Walker. We're talking about 300 cases a year even, right? But we need to baby step that thing like crazy.
So it could probably open up doors for future techs. Quick responses from you too.
Quickly, I think that what's important is really to identify the real unmet need and to bring value to surgeon and patient. I mean, if you bring something which does not really change the outcome for the patient or the ease for the surgeon, I mean, the adoption won't be at the rendezvous.
Yeah, and we look at it also from a slightly different angle of, as when we look at our deals that come in, is there reproducibility? And so, it's not just a highly trained academic physician that can do this procedure, but also one that is more of in a remote or a community hospital. And also, does it, require a mass infrastructure or not in order to support the technology? If it checks those boxes, that's something that we also get really excited about, because it can potentially reach such a larger patient population as well.
So great. The other questions, if you don't mind, let's use this in the networking session. We really have to. We've already gone beyond. I'd like to say one quick word. A big shout out to the technology transfer group. I thanks the panel members for being so kind with your time. And obviously, a special thanks to a dear friend, Amir Nyberg, and Dina and Matthew. Please.